Hello and welcome to Practical Inclusion. Here in Victoria, summer has arrived, maybe just for one day, but we'll see how that goes. It's been pretty cold and wet and windy for a while now. I'd like to start by recognising the continuing connection to the land the Wadawurrung people have down here in the part of the world that I live, work and play. I'd pay my respects to their elders past and present and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who happen to be joining us today. Certainly, in my mind, the sooner we get this land, Australia, back into the hands of the traditional custodians, the better off we'll all be, because they certainly did a much better job of looking after this land than what white settlers have done so. And so hopefully, and we saw, I think, the Cape York land, and I'm not sure what the traditional name is for that. That's research for this afternoon to learn more about that, but that land was handed back to the traditional custodians, and hopefully we continue to see more and more of those stories. Hannah, welcome today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's just so great to have you come on. For those who don't know the background, Hannah and I actually spoke on in a semi-private fashion. I run some webinars internally for organisations, and Hannah did that for me with a local council. We had a chat and it was amazing and I learnt so much. And so I wanted to make sure that we also get Hannah on this LinkedIn Live for more people to hear the incredible messages that she has for us. Hannah, did you want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land you're on?
So I am currently sitting in my wheelchair, for those of you who can't see, because obviously you can only see my head and shoulders, on the land, on Dharawal land, for which obviously belongs to Dharawal people of the Eora Nation. And like you, Bree, I feel very strongly that this land has forever and will always be Aboriginal land. It remains unceded to sovereignty, and it should be placed firmly back in the hands of its true Indigenous owners, because I think Indigenous culture holds a lot of the solutions to dealing with climate change and a number of global issues that we're facing as a world at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Hannah, you seem to be doing some amazing things at the moment. I am seeing your name pop up everywhere, which fills me with joy. Did you want to tell us a little bit about your story and why you're doing the work that you're doing and what work you actually are doing for those who haven't come across you before?
Yeah, sure. You might want to sit down. This could take a while. I am a rider and disability advocate. So obviously I mentioned earlier that I'm in a wheelchair. I have cerebral palsy, which is a physical disability that affects my fine and gross motor skills. In English, that means it affects everything from my ability to walk and balance to my ability to like hold a knife and fork properly or handwrite neatly, that kind of stuff. Cerebral palsy exists on a spectrum. So up one end of the spectrum, you have people who are hemiplegic, which means that they're only affected on one side. They might walk a bit lopsided, have a claw hand, that kind of stuff. But unless you're really paying attention or they get really tired, it's not that noticeable. Then you have me, who sits firmly in the middle, and right at the other end, the extreme kind of end of the spectrum, you have people who pretty much the only things they can do independently are breathe and swallow. But obviously the fact that they're nonverbal doesn't mean that their intelligence is any less, which is a huge and damaging assumption that a lot of people have about people who can't communicate in ways that we have learned to understand yet. Some of the smartest people I know happen to be nonverbal. So just some myth busting right off the bat. The things that I am known for, I guess, with being a writer and a disability advocate, are probably my campaign asking Disney to create a disabled Disney princess, which I've been running for about a year now. It's actually going to be the year kind of anniversary in the next couple of days, so that's pretty special. We've racked up 55,000 signatures from around the world or thereabouts, which is a mind-blowing number. And the only way I can possibly kind of begin to understand it is think of it in terms of like venue size. That's the only possible way that I've got for like contextualizing that many people. But yeah, on top of the Disney Princess petition, I obviously write a lot about disability. I'm the co-founder of an event for Cerebral Palsy Alliance, which is the main charity that deals with cerebral palsy here in New South Wales, called Krazy Kosci Klimb. Some nice alliteration there, where basically the idea is that we help people with CP and their families climb Mount Kosciuszko, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is Australia's highest mountain, one of the 7 summits, and something that most people would definitely kind of assume, including the people with CP themselves, is sort of out of the range of possibility for what they're capable of. The other big role that I have, yes, I'm still going, I'm so sorry,
do not apologize, keep going.
That I am the editor-in-chief and co-founder of a global publication platform called Missing Perspectives. And Missing Perspectives basically has the goal of addressing the marginalization of women and girls around the world. We basically were born out of this report done by the Gates Foundation and other social research, which shows that women's kind of engagement and interest in the news, as well as their representation across news, media, democracy, and decision-making, is at an all-time low, because they're just not being represented. Like, women aren't being called on at the same rate as men to give their expert opinions. We're not getting bylines at the same rate, that sort of thing. A recent report by the Australian, I think it's the Women for Media Institute here in Australia, I'm pretty sure that's what they're called, found that the only place where male and female journalists or writers have any sort of gender parity is in the entertainment space, which quite wrongly, like a lot of people perceive as kind of lesser or fluffier journalism anyway. And that's obviously a deeply gendered view. We're definitely not given the hard-hitting stuff. And I think as anyone who is watching this that has paid any attention at all to the news in the last year knows, it's a really interesting and strange time to be a woman, or at least to present as a woman, both, in this country at the moment. And Missing Perspectives hopes to be the solution to all of that on a global scale.
Amazing. Love it. And so people can read Missing Perspectives. I believe we'll put a link up in the comments afterwards.
Yeah. Just go to www.missingperspectives.com and you'll find all of our wonderful articles.
Yeah,
from the women that we have who are writing for us. And something that's really important, that kind of sets us apart, I guess, from mainstream media, is the priority we place on lived experience. So 95% of the articles that are written for us, whether that be on issues of climate change, child marriage, or period poverty, let's say, for example, are written by women and girls who either they themselves individually or their communities, in terms of geographic location, have lived experience of the issues that they're writing about, which we think is really important and makes a lot of sense. But lived experience isn't quite prioritized with the same value by mainstream media or by any sort of apparatus and organization, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Would totally agree with that. Can you talk a little bit more about representation? Like, we talk, particularly in the diversity and inclusion space, where we're constantly talking about, the phrase, you can't be what you can't see. But I worry that some people are kind of getting a little bit tired with that and don't really think deeply about why it is so important that there is representation of people from different experiences and backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit more towards your motivation to really, particularly around, say, the Disney Princess campaign, why is it so important?
Well, quite simply, I grew up not seeing anyone who looked like me on screen or in the books I read, the movies I watched, the games I played, the toys that were available to me. There was no one who looked like me or really represented my experience. And I guess growing up, the only sort of representation that I did have was A, either Paralympic athletes, or B, people who had been in sort of horrific accidents. And it was sort of supposed to be like a safety warning. You know how on those drink driving ads, they always have the sad person in the wheelchair who's like, I ruined my life.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So both of those can be equally damaging, and there will be some of you who are looking at me thinking, well, why is the Paralympic athlete option damaging? So I want to make sure that I explain that as best I can. First of all, obviously, I want to say that I don't want to take away from or devalue the achievements of Paralympic athletes, but I think it's really important that we understand that anyone who goes to the Paralympics is doing so at an elite level. It's not something you can just rock up and give a go. It takes years and years of training, dedication, sacrifice, pain, blood, sweat, tears, all of those things. And I, especially as a kid, used to really chafe against people's question of like, what would your Paralympic sport be? Because I grew up with two able-bodied sisters, and I would look at them and be like, hold on, you're not asking them what their Olympic sport is going to be, because you understand that A, getting to the Olympics only happens to like the best of the best, and B, you know that not every able-bodied kid even wants to go to the Olympics. So why is that the only sort of avenue of success? Not to mention, obviously, that the Paralympics only happen every 4 years, and often those athletes and their stories end up being used as kind of vehicles for inspiration porn. If you haven't heard that term before, it is a term coined by the late and great Australian disability activist Stella Young. She gave this brilliant TED talk about it. I would suggest you go and look it up after this. But basically, inspiration porn is the idea that disabled people in particular can be found inspiring for doing simple things. So, like, I could be out and about with my family, enjoying lunch or a walk or something, and I might have a stranger come up to me on the street and say, wow, it's so inspiring to see you out and about. And it's like, well, hold on, I'm just living my life. I'm just doing the thing that I want to do, that I need to do. What would you expect of me? Why do you assume that a disabled person is always looking at life behind a glass window, so to speak, or really sad that this is their life? And of course, don't get me wrong, there are moments where, because of the way the world is not built for me, or because of some of the kind of traumas that I've sustained, it can be really hard being a disabled person, and it does sometimes make me very sad and very angry. But my whole life isn't that. And I think it's really dangerous that a lot of the media perception of disability is sadness, grief, anger, bitterness, your life is over, all that sort of stuff. Because especially in my case, and in a lot of cases, like I was born with this. Nothing happened to me that took anything away from me. It's just how it is. So what does it teach me as a young kid that as soon as I'm born and I'm like trying to learn the world, that people are immediately telling me my life is over before it's even started.
Yeah, well, I've heard you talk about this before, but it really just keeps hitting home for me, that concept that people place on your, I guess, the value of your life and the way you would be living it, and the expectations of, that you're either a sports person or you're at home feeling sad.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like you're either exceptional or you're nothing,
yeah,
which
yeah.
can be really dangerous because, as we know, not every person is going to be exceptional. That's not how the world works, and not every person should have to deal with the pressure of feeling that way. We should be able to live ordinary lives that involve, us being teachers or pharmacists or florists or whatever it might be. It's really important that we see disabled people out and about in the community, um, especially for young kids, because I grew up not really even seeing a lot of disabled adults. I didn't have any idea what a future for myself could even look like, except for the fact that I knew I didn't want to be a Paralympian. Um, I know a lot of people say the future is a blank page, and they mean that in the sense that, like, it's exciting and it's full of opportunity and you can make it whatever you want. But in my case, it literally felt like a blank page, as in, like, what even goes here? I don't know if anything goes here. Like, am I supposed to just disappear? What happens next?
Yeah. Can we talk about the intersections of being a person with a disability and being a woman as well?
Of
Um,
course.
what, where do you see the extra challenges that come with that intersection of being a woman and being disabled?
Well, it's really interesting because a lot of the messages that we consume as women are distinctly and directly tailored to be about our bodies, like our body image, how we look, how we present to other people, whether we're considered attractive, all of those sorts of things. And yet, those messages about body are in direct opposition or contradiction, if you like, to the messages that you receive as a disabled person about your body. Like for me, I have had a really kind of hit and miss relationship with the idea of even going shopping or fashion or any sort of interest in like the aesthetic of things, because I would go into a shop, and I'm sure we've all had this experience for one reason or another. You look at the models and you're like, well, that's not me. That's not my body. But also, like, you look at the people trying on the clothes in the store and you go, well, that's not going to sit on me like that because they're standing up and they've got toned muscles and they haven't got weird curves and strange scars and all sorts of other things that make my body unique, but make it very difficult to, um, I guess, perceive it as aesthetically, so to speak. And like, people aren't ever looking at me because they're interested in my style or they're interested in me, like, attraction wise. They're always looking at me because I'm different or I stand out, or they're like being forced to confront their own bias and all that sort of stuff. And obviously, like, a lot of the pressure that gets placed on women, even still in society now, is, when are you going to be in a relationship? When are you going to have babies? When are you going to do the things that, women were put on this earth to do? And I go, well, I don't know. Like, I mean, if relationships are supposed to be like the be all and end all, what does it say when the discussion about relationships and me is always, well, your partner's going to have to be disabled. And it's like, sorry, why? And you have people go, I mean, it'll be easier. And I'm like, easier for who? Easier for me? Easier for them? Or easier for the imaginary third party in this situation, the able-bodied person who, if I'm already dating a disabled person, doesn't have to deal with dating me? There's like this weird perception that the only people that could possibly want to sort of gel with your life or find you attractive are other disabled people. And that makes it feel really gross.
Yeah, wow. That's big stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, because that's a perspective. Okay. As you say, you're about missing perspectives. That's a perspective that many of us wouldn't have heard before. I can certainly relate to the fashion and the shopping example. Yeah. Because it's exactly the same for me, that the clothes that I want to wear aren't modeled by bodies that look anything like mine. And so I can in some way relate to that, absolutely. And I guess for many queer people, there is a relation there too around that relationship status, particularly for those who are of us who are pan or bisexual. That only somebody also who is queer or queer presenting would be interested in somebody who is queer as some of us are. So there's perhaps some overlap there as well. But thank you, for sharing that perspective with us.
That's all right. And I think like there is a lot of overlap between disabled people and the LGBTQ community. Like there are many people who sit at the intersection of both of those communities, and part of me wonders if the exploration and fluidity of sexuality is something that so many disabled people pursue, because part of them knows that they're going to, like, subconsciously knows that they're going to be more accepted that way.
Yeah, it's a good point. And certainly there's a lot of great research out about the intersections of LGBTIQA plus identities and people with disability and the added barriers and challenges that can come with that, particularly in the workplace. And I see that quite commonly, that people who do intersect with being disabled and being LGBTIQ quite commonly are having the worst experiences in our workplaces. And absolutely be aware of that and actively doing something about it. Go.
I was going to say, to speak to that for a second, I actually, as a member of the disabled community who presents pretty obviously with a visible disability, have a unique advantage in that no one is ever going to turn me away or tell me that I'm faking it, because let's be honest, this would be the longest con in the history of cons if I were. But like, I have the unique privilege of being able to go to a doctor's office or something and say, something is wrong, please fix this, or this is a symptom of my cerebral palsy that is annoying the heck out of me, please let's deal with a treatment plan for this. Whereas so many people with chronic and invisible disabilities struggle to even be believed or accepted or validated or get the support that they need to even be accepted into the disabled community. So yeah, I think those of us with visible disabilities have a unique privilege and should always advocate to keep space for those who don't have that privilege.
Yeah, really good point. Now, we're close to time. I realise there's a kind of a big deal for you tomorrow.
Yes. There might be.
That I think you're a little bit nervous about, potentially.
I am, Bree. However did you tell? And yeah, don't worry about time. I've got all the time in the world, so if we go over, that's okay too. But yes, I guess that we can stop being cryptic, and I can say that Missing Perspectives and I are nominated and a finalist for the Women's Weekly Women of the Future Awards, which take place tomorrow. There's a really fancy luncheon in the Opera House, and it's a contest essentially. The winner gets quite the sizable bursary in support of their cause. I have been kind of watching and researching the other girls' causes, and they're all amazing. So I am definitely not expecting to win by any stretch. But the thing that I am kind of excited for, and yes, deeply anxious about, is the potential for networking, because basically it's like Australia's most influential and high-profile media people all in one room. Like, some of the judges include Ita Buttrose, Julie Bishop, Tanya Plibersek, and I have to give a speech in front of these people tomorrow that basically sells Missing Perspectives and tells them why it's a cause they should care about. So, yes, wish me luck, guys, because it could be a bit hairy.
Definitely plenty of luck coming from me. I'll be thinking of you entirely, but also as an opportunity for people. You are looking for donors for Missing Perspectives, is my understanding. And so, people working in organisations who are looking to support a cause, maybe they could get in touch with you. How would they do that?
So, well, I guess you're all watching this on LinkedIn, so you can either go to my LinkedIn profile at Hannah Diviney, and that's Diviney, just like it is on the screen, or you can send me an email, hannah@hannahdiviney.com. I'm sure Bree will put the links to my social media in the show notes. You can find me there. Basically, what we're looking for donors for is because we obviously want to pay the girls who write for us. We want to pay our staff as well. But most importantly, we are looking to use money to run these workshops that would essentially teach women and young girls the skills in telling their stories, self-advocacy, and basically kind of encouraging them to be journalists, I guess, because we're of the belief that anyone can be a journalist. All they need is a pen, a platform, and someone willing to listen.
Yeah, fantastic, awesome. So those listening, and we'll share this far and wide, and hopefully you'll get some people interested, because I think it's so incredibly important that we hear these stories, not just yours, but the stories of the people who are writing for you. It's such important work, and I think you're doing an amazing job at it. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep educating us. If you're not following Hannah on Instagram, do that too, because there's like cool stuff that you can learn through there from her. So please do all of the above. Thank you, everybody, for listening in, and thank you, Hannah, tremendously for supporting my business.
Thank you for having me.
Show and doing some other work with me as well. It's fantastic. It's such a privilege to be able to hear your story and give platform to it. So thank you. We will have another episode next week. I know I've been crawling to the end of the year, so we've missed a couple of weeks. We will have it's become quite an intense struggle, and I know it's not just me. There's work happening everywhere, and lots of competing demands for people and for guests. So bear with us. We'll get through the end of the year, and then we'll continue this series next year as well. I absolutely have launched a new website. It's Go Easy Honest, because it's literally like brand new. So there's a few bugs that we're still ironing out. But we will be starting to post some of these shows in a form of a blog on there. So there is a blog on my website if you want to join in on that. And if anybody has contributions they want to make to it, they're more than welcome as well. But check out the new website and let me know your thoughts, people.
Sign me up.
And we will catch you all next week. Thanks a lot, Hannah.
Bye, guys.